We can go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone to June's CE2. If you know, I'm going to go through a couple of announcements and different things for, first of all, welcoming those of you guys that are here for the very first time. Welcome you to this Kiko Chat Zoom link, and it'll become clear as we go on why we choose to do it this way versus webinar style, and there's a lot of engagement here, so that's a lot of it. Videos are completely optional. This is, for those of you guys that are aware, this is something that we have done historically in the iLab since 2015. So this is not a new event, but thankfully this is something we're pretty easily able to transition online to the Zoom format. And so, like I said, video is optional. We ask that you just be on mute when people are talking, so that you don't pop up if somebody has chosen to be on speaker view. So speaker view is an option that you probably have on Zoom. I have mine on gallery because I like to see all your faces, but you can also have speaker view such that whoever's talking is who pops up for you. And there'll be various points where you can participate. I don't think, have it on auto mute. I think you have the capability to turn it on and off, although India can correct me. If you don't have the capability of turning your mute off, then you can raise your hand. But I think you guys have control over it, right? Can somebody test that for me? Oh yeah, Steve, you're able to. So you all have control over your own mute. So, but what I'll do at the different points where we have participation, I'll call on you just so we don't have people speaking all at once. And then of course our speakers will unmute themselves. And then I'm just giving my little checklist of things I wanted to talk to you guys about. So how today's set up, I wanted to, again, welcome you guys that are here for the first time, and would love to hear in the chat if you want to throw in there how you heard about this event. That's a great intel for us, and bring your friends next time. We do this always the third Tuesday of the month, and it will continue in Zoom until further notice, basically. How the outline is that the first speaker that we have is an early stage speaker, so someone with a newer stage business. Today we have Leslie Gordette. I forgot to confirm how to say your last name. Did I say that correctly, Leslie?
That's correct. You got this.
Perfect. Okay. That's important. And so he'll share first about his company, and then he'll have an ask for you to participate and help him solve that barrier for growth. And you are welcome when we get to that to put things in the chat window, and we'll show him how to download that chat at the end as well, so that he can have some of your suggestions or connections. And then after him, we have what is called a crash and learn speaker. So crash and learn is a speaker who has 20 plus years of entrepreneurial experience, a seasoned entrepreneur, if you will, to share the things that they've learned. I guess a couple months ago, it was Coin's near-death experiences, but just different lessons learned through the entrepreneurial journey. And we have always found that it does not matter your background, no matter what your industry, you can always gain something from those lessons learned. And so after that, we'll have announcements, and I do want to thank our hosts. I'll do that here in a second. We'll have announcements, and that will also be an open floor for you to share different events and hiring. And then finally, probably around 9:30, there we have breakout rooms. That is the purpose of Kiko Chat, is that you have the opportunity to go into breakout rooms where our two speakers will be in separate rooms, and you have the ability, unlike regular Zoom with Kiko Chat, you can actually go in and out of rooms as you please. You can even stay in this room, network, etc. So that is why we choose to use this platform. It's a really unique opportunity, and something that we really, really wanted to foster the environment the best that we could that you get in the iLab. So to start off, I want to thank our co-hosts. So I wanted to thank Community Investment Collaborative, CIC, the Central Virginia SBDC, the Small Business Development Center, CBIC, Charlottesville Business Innovation Council, the Batten Institute at Darden, and then the iLab as well. Actually, the iLab is a host, and our sponsors is the Batten Institute. So, and Seville Trupp as well. So thank you all. And so with that, we can jump in. And I will, for people arriving late, I will explain some of the logistics a couple times as we go. But to start off, wanted to introduce Leslie Gordette. A little bit about his background is that he used to be a French teacher and also I think was and still is a soccer coach. He has a company called LG's Elixir. You might be familiar if you've gone to the farmer's market in the last couple of years. I know his elixir is hot at the farmer's market since 2018. I think about a year earlier he started sampling this elixir out, got great feedback, and started this company. So he's going to share his story. And then at the end, like I said, he'll have an ask and I'll guide you guys from there. So Leslie, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Hope, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Carolina, for guiding me into Zooming, and the CIC family for supporting me all throughout, and all you guys on the panel. And I'm Leslie Gourdet, and on behalf of LG's Elixir, which was designed literally out of survival. And that was back in 1993, I caught the flu for the first time. And I've never had before, and being from Haiti, I didn't really know what to do. I didn't have any networking here for help. So anyway, to make a long story short, I reminisce on the time that I used to be ill when I was young. My great-grandmother and my grandmother used to go out to the garden and pick up some herbs and spices and make that kind of potion that they will give us when we not feel well. So they were a little different than what the elixir is, but they were very potent. One thing I remember, they were very, very, very bitter. Anyway, upon catching the flu, I was like shivering and I was sweating, I was cold. I didn't know what was going on. So I called my mother, and she reminded me of a potion that she had given me prior to leaving Haiti. And she told me to take a teaspoon of that. So I knew exactly what that was. So I went to the medicine cabinet, take that lotion, took a teaspoon. Though it was very, very bitter, but it was like some kind of a bittersweet, because I felt right away like there was hope. Because I just feel like, okay, I think I'm going to survive this. Anyway, to make a long story short, then I decided to take my life into my own hands. And I started to make my own, not elixir then, but it used to be in the form of a tea with ginger, lemon, and honey. And I became a vegetarian, and I started sharing the tea with my classrooms. And most of my students liked it. Anyway, along the way, becoming a vegetarian, and I started juicing, wheatgrass and all. So one day I just decided to juice the ginger and the lemon as opposed to put it in hot water, because I had then learned that anything that you put in hot water will destroy some of the enzymes. So I started to juice it, and it was like literally a life-changing experience. By that, I mean like upon the knowledge of these different powerful antioxidants you find in spices and herbs like turmeric and ginger and garlic and so on, which are all in the elixir. And I'm going to put the list on the screen so you guys can take a look at it if you can. And the garlic and turmeric, ginger, lemon, lime, habanero peppers, and I also have honey and onion, and if I'm missing any, I don't remember, and I think it might be a wine vinegar as well. So anyway, so that took about maybe a span of almost 20 years to get to that many ingredients. And the final product looks just like this bottle I'm going to put on the screen here that you'll find on the farmer's market. And this logo was designed by a very good friend called Chicho. Maybe you guys probably heard of him in the community. He makes a lot of murals that you will see throughout, Charlottesville and Auburn. Anyway, so upon doing this elixir, after the event of August 2017, and I had a lot of friends who were very, very, how would I say, very hurt by that incident. And there was a lot of people reaching out to contribute to the health of the community. And I felt compelled to do the same, but I didn't know what to do. And that's when one of my best friends suggested that maybe you should offer your elixir. And I thought about it for a little while, and I said, well, why not? Let's give it a shot. And I started to make it and go into the farmer's market, which I've been going literally since I moved there in Charlottesville, since 1990. And I have some of my friends and some of the vendors tasting it. Everybody liked the idea. And in May 26th of 2018, the elixir debuted successfully at the farmer's market. And from there, it's been quite a journey. It's very demanding, and it's like they say, labor of love, but the benefits are very encouraging to see that, most of my clients coming back and sharing their experiences and the impact on their health. And I've been very pleased with how it has developed until COVID-19 hit us. Then I was totally unprepared for that because I didn't have a website and everything went online. So I had to navigate to that new platform in order to keep the Elixir alive, because I was determined to keep it going as long as I can by any means necessary. So far it has survived well. And here we are. I'm taking the Elixir almost daily, and it's a product where it's very versatile. You could use it as a salad dressing, and you could make a cocktail, marinate your food, and so on and so on. And here we are. Do I have any more time?
Yes.
Okay. So I studied at the farmers market here locally for the first summer of May, from May 18 to the end of the summer. And by the following summer of 2019, I was beginning to get invited to other markets. And I studied locally with East Pork Market, there's Albemarle Farmers Market, they have the Forest Lake Farmers Markets. And in November of 2019, I was invited to vend at Charlottesville James in Richmond, which is one of the premier market out there in the Richmond region, which was quite an experience. And it was similar dynamics as the city of Charlottesville's market. And my goal was to grow the business. Let's put it this way. And then recently, as of actually 2 weeks ago, I was able to navigate to Northern Virginia, because due to COVID, I wasn't able to participate early on during the season, and because I had no connections and I was still building the website, I had no way of selling online. And so far, it's been proven to be a very fun, I would say, because I really enjoy sharing the Elixir with the communities I'm involved in. And it successfully debuted there 2 weeks ago, and I'm excited. And there's another connection that I've made there that invited me to 2 other markets. I think it's Prince George. I heard they invited me to do as soon as I can get someone to take over my spot in Northern Virginia to go down to St. George. And it's been so far a very, very rewarding experience. The COVID really had a little setback, and I was able to survive it. Now we're on the upswing, even though we're not fully open as far as the farmers market per se. But things open up a little bit, and the Elixir is pleased with what's developing at the moment. It has impacted my projection as of where we are right now, or where I could have been at the beginning of the spring. But we're keeping our heads up and moving on. And our project now was to have our own warehouse so we can produce the Elixir in our own facility. Because right now I'm sharing with someone else, and I really feel like the growth of the Elixir now is in a point where it's like it needs its own home. And due to the atmosphere, to the of what's going on with respect to COVID right now, I'm a little tentative on fully kind of focus on would it be a very, I would say, a very proper move to make as far as getting my own kitchen and my own storefront in order to keep growing the business.
Awesome.
And it's been very rewarding, and I've been very pleased, and I was able to rehire a couple of my employees, and I'm looking forward to the next couple of weeks to be able to hire another 2 or 3 employees. So I'm really excited. I'm in a good place, and keeping my fingers crossed for the growth.
Awesome. Thank you, Leslie. And I know you went through the CIC program as well.
Yes.
Did you, so at this point, do you have an ask for the crowd? So something that you'd like advice on, help with, that you guys talked about?
Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah. at this point, you have the opportunity to share and ask like a question that you need help with for the audience to help you engage with.
Well, okay. What my concern right now is it the proper time? Though I do not have the finance right now, and we have to be clear about that. But based on my timeline, I'm still trying to get my own storefront so I can produce the elixir in the kitchen in the back and then sell in the storefront. And that could be a little pricey based on the location. And I'm wondering if that probably would have been a wise thing to do at this time. And also with respect to social media marketing, which I'm totally not savvy on doing these kind of things, and a little bit of help on social marketing would be good.
So the question is, so I'm clear, you want to know, is this the right time in light of the pandemic to pursue getting a storefront? And is the question also, should you invest in getting your social media marketing up?
Well, the main question is is it the proper time
storefront.
to open my own store? Yeah.
Storefront. Okay. So do you guys, so now you have the opportunity, I'm going to look at the hand raising feature. We can start that way. And if nobody's talking, you can share, but he would love feedback on whether or not this is the right timing for him to pursue getting a storefront for his elixir. So wanted to open up the floor to anyone that wants to give feedback.
I'd like to ask why you want to open up a storefront.
Well, in order to make the elixir accessible to the majority of our citizens in our community.
Yeah, in Charlottesville.
In Charlottesville, that is correct.
Okay. Have you thought of other ways besides the farmer's market or a storefront to do that?
Well, I've recently tried to build a website.
Okay.
A favorite way of sharing with the community. And I really do like the one-on-one interaction with my clients so I can share the experiences. And the storefront will be to compact two different kind of ideas because I need to have a commercial kitchen to produce the juice anyway. So if I could find one that I can turn into a storefront as well. So that, in my opinion, would reach a lot more people in our community with the hope that. Yeah.
Well, the reason I ask is because what we've seen since COVID is that it's a lot easier to get exposure to a lot of people on the internet than it is having people come through your store.
Right.
And I'm wondering if to accomplish your purposes, you couldn't partner with somebody who already has a storefront. In other words, to pick out a health food store or a something like that where you could sample your product and achieve the same thing and take orders plus sell online. You don't even need a website to sell online. You could sell through Facebook. Facebook has a new program called Facebook Marketplace.
Okay.
And that costs nearly as much as a storefront.
That's a good idea.
So I'd be happy to talk to you about that at another time if you'd like to pursue it.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's a great idea.
Hey, Dylan, if you want to put your contact in chat, and I'll show Leslie how to, or Kaylene and I can show them how to access the chat later.
Okay.
Who else has an idea? That was a great idea, Dylan. Any additional thoughts on whether or not he should pursue a physical space or any other ideas?
Are you doing hand raises or people just jumping in?
I guess if no one's raising their hand, you can jump in. So go ahead, Christian.
Leslie, I was just going to ask you, do you have production volume issues? So if if you found a place to move your product, you know, let's say it was carried in another store or elsewhere or beyond Charlottesville, would you be swamped? I mean, would you be unable to produce at any kind of volume?
I would
I
not
guess,
say.
are you trying to keep the batches small and sort of be artisanal about it? Or?
That's a good question. It's all relative to the number of cases that you want. But I think right now I've been focusing on building the business, and I'm able to produce a relatively good amount for the local stores. But if you're talking about big stores like with several hundred of cases, I'm not at that point yet. But it needs to be in a couple of weeks. I could probably crank out 100 cases or something if I have to. And then, of course, I would have to have the labor force to do that and the finance to get the ingredients and all that. But I'm building up to that point.
Yeah, I was just gonna. I mean, I guess what I was gonna suggest would be. So we had a local beekeeper where I used to live who produced. He produced extensively, but the way you found his product, if you were not familiar with him, he was at farmers market. Same idea, but it would be a small display of the product in other stores. So small markets, or it's going to be hard to get into like a Whole Foods maybe, but smaller markets, you would just have a small number of product SKUs or whatever, and just refresh them, every day or two, and then people are just seeing your logo, and then you're supporting that with being at the farmers market and supporting that with being on Facebook or sort of community publications, or your face is out there, and then they're seeing you and buying you at two different times.
Right.
So you're doing you get the face to face at the market, or maybe you're doing video shoots that you stick little blips of you somewhere. Then they find your product, and then they contact you later. So I think you can get that community exposure, and
that's an amazing idea.
Sort of interpersonal feedback, but don't see them having the exact same time. So you can let them split.
Well, thank you. That's a great idea. Even though I've thought of doing some presentations at different stores, but to revive that for me is very encouraging and inspiring.
And you could do like little guest appearances, right? So this week you're at this store, for an hour. This week at that store.
Yeah, that looks, that sounds very promising. Thank you very much for this.
Steve?
Yeah.
Thank you, Christian.
Dylan's, Leslie, I think Dylan's correct about the storefront. If you're looking, although the idea of having a place to manufacture and maybe have people do will call pickups or come in, make a call, come in and pick up, that's not a bad idea. But spending, I don't know what your idea is for having a storefront. Is it like in a, like on the downtown mall or in a heavily trafficked area? It might be pretty expensive for your rent as far as that goes. But, you could, wherever you start manufacturing in higher quantities, they could definitely do will call. How much have you done with the fairs, like artisan fairs, or the Monticello? Have you looked at all like the Monticello Wine Trail and the different wine festivals and that sort of thing?
Okay, I'd only done one wine festival in Richmond. That was the weekend right before we hit with the COVID-19.
Right.
And that went pretty well. And I had planned to do some expos in New York, Atlanta, San Francisco, but this hasn't materialized yet. And the business it just turned 2 years old, May 26th. And I have planned to do a lot more festivals, but being such like a one-person kind of team right now, trying to get all these things into place is quite demanding. But I will in the future participate in craft festival and wine festival and so on as I'm more aware of them. Yeah.
I think actually I've been working, I think Nathaniel Owens was in your class actually, with his jewelry business, and I've been working with
Nathan, yeah.
I've been working with him on some things, and it seems to me the things he's been looking to do with his jewelry with the artisan fairs could apply very well to your I've had your elixir at one of the mentoring launches. But your elixir would do quite well, I think, in most fairs, actually, to travel around to those, because you do well at the city market, right?
Right.
Yeah, same idea. There's also permanent fairs in some of the cities that we've been researching, There's one, I think it's called, I'll look it up for you and send it an email. I think it's called Artists and Fleas, but up in New York, and they have permanent flea markets, but they're really artisan fairs every weekend. But up in Georgetown, they have one also, where it's not that expensive. It's only a couple $100 for the whole weekend for Saturday and Sunday to have a table. So those are interesting. But this whole idea of the retail, I think the idea of selling through retail and your products in stores like gift shops could do quite well. Along with, you know, have you approached the woman at the owner at the Virginia shop to see what she thinks of with the idea with things with it? And, you know, I think the gift market could be quite interesting for the elixir also, as far as that goes.
Thank you so much. These are great ideas. And even though I've reflected on doing those things, but I never pinpoint where, and I never had a chance to do the research. So any information that I can get as far as like leading to where these are located will be quite helpful. But I'm certainly going to get in touch with Nathan right away today, so he could kind of guide me into what he's doing. So
no, that's good. Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, we have two more. Steve, do you have anything else to add? I'm gonna.
No, that's good. I can catch up with Leslie later.
Thank you for all those great ideas. Jamie Conklin, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to, I was sort of on the same beat as Christian and Steve, that looking at local merchants, and I would think about Rebecca's Natural Foods and Organic Integral Yoga. Those are both stores that pride themselves on their local presence, and those might be really good for you. The other thing I was thinking is, I don't know how much setup is involved in your kitchen, but it seems that there are a lot of restaurants that have gone out of business recently. And my office is located in the Glass Building, and I know that the 2 restaurants there went out of business. And so you might be able to use this time to get a commercial kitchen and, you know, get a short-term lease, but set up a commercial kitchen and produce production in one of these restaurants that aren't collecting rent right now. I bet you could probably get some good deals. And figure out what you're going to do when things open. I can put you in contact with the landlord.
I know Mary had suggested something similar. So thank you very much for that, Jamie. And then Craig, we'll give you the last one for now.
Thanks, Hope. Leslie, yeah, I was going to say pretty much a little bit like what Jamie was suggesting, and kind of a combination of Jamie and Christian and the others, Steve probably. Now is probably a good time to partner, make some deals. I would even say the only issue with getting a short-term lease on a kitchen, which I think is a great suggestion, that you don't know what's going to happen a little bit down the road. I would actually seek to maybe partner with a local restaurant itself, maybe use their kitchen in off hours, maybe feature it there. And also what's interesting about the idea of not having a storefront is you've got an interesting story. I would tell the story on your website, and I would make the product a little interestingly scarce. In other words, where do you get it? It's like a pop-up thing. It's like it's at this store one day, it's at this store another day kind of thing. And create a little mystique around it, because the product has a little mystique around it. So I would actually, instead of making that long-term investment in a retail operation of your own, I would look to partner for a kitchen and then look for ways to feature it in other places that have been mentioned.
Thank you much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Leslie, I think these guys saved you a lot of money.
I got lucky this morning. It's exciting to be getting all this great feedback. So I'm very lucky.
So we can help you download the chat, but if anyone else has something for Leslie, 2 things. Number 1, you can throw it in chat. We'll get it downloaded and emailed over to him. Number 2, there's going to be a breakout room, so you can always join him there after and continue this dialogue. So Leslie, you might get more ideas then. But that was awesome. And then also you got a shout out from Meredith McCrae. I think I said that right. I'm sorry if I didn't, Meredith. But I think you guys know each other from West Albemarle, 21 years ago. She said she recognized you from the hallway.
My student. Meredith McCray.
Yeah.
Oh my God. One of the best ever. I remember she was sitting right up front, right by the door. Oh my God.
Nice. Well, you must have done well. She's a thriving consulting business now. So good for you. All right. Well, now we're going to switch gears. I'm excited to introduce Robin Felder. A little bit about his background before I give him the floor is that Robin educationally had his bachelor's from William & Mary, interestingly, in chemistry and music, which I think hopefully we'll get to hear a little bit about how that might be intertwined. But then he got his PhD at Georgetown doing his postdoc at NIH in biochemistry. He has over 20 years in the pharmaceutical and medical field. He has actually helped start over 9 companies in various industries from, I'll tell you in a second, from, it's a good list, from hypertension, diabetes, elder care, robotics, regenerative medicine, medical automation. He actually is an inventor. He has over, I believe, 27 patents and patent pending. He's the CEO of Hypogen, which is a pharmaceutical company. He's a professor of pathology, associate director of clinical chemistry, chair of medicalautomation.org, nonprofit educational organization. And most interestingly, he also owns a distillery. So this man is a jack of many trades, and I know very well respected in the community. And really excited to hear from you, Robin. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor.
I always like really good introductions, and that's a good introduction.
Was that okay? All right, you can pay me later.
It shows I'm totally schizophrenic when it comes to things I'm interested in. So, don't ask my wife how she handles me. And that's where the distillery came in. I'll start with that story. She would give me 2 ounces of brandy every night just to calm me down, because I'd go back to work at midnight and come home at 4 o'clock in the morning. So she said, I'm going to slow you down with a little brandy. So then I said, okay, if it works for me, it'll work for a whole lot of people. So my distillery turned into 24 acres of fruit trees. So I have pear, apricot, apple, and blood peach. That's another story. Brandies, and blood peach just essentially blows your head off with the smell. And then I do, when the fruit runs out, because that's kind of a challenge. You can't have fruit going all year. You have your fall harvest, and that's the end of it. So then I go to gin, but I said, okay, there's a lot of gin when you go to a liquor store. What isn't everybody else doing? And I said, okay, nobody knows which juniper is in the bottle of their gin. And I said, where does gin by law has to have juniper in it? That's what defines it. And then it's up to the distiller how you deal with the rest of the herbs. You can do anything you want as long as it isn't toxic. And being a biochemist, I understand that. So I said, okay, what's going to be my shtick, so to speak? Why do I do varietal gins? So I became an expert in juniper botany. There are 41 species of juniper, and it's the only plant that grows from the Arctic to the Antarctic, very hardy. Species of juniper. And so suddenly I said, oh, I've got a whole palette here I can play with. And so I went to Google and I said varietal gins, and nothing showed up. And I said, okay, how many 2-word combinations can you put in Google and not get any hits? And so I tried lots of 2-word combinations and got hits all the time. So I said, okay, my next click is going to be the USPTO, the Patent and Trademark Office, to trademark varietal gins. So now I have the trademark on varietal gins. And when you go into a liquor store, I'll be the only purveyor of a gin that you know which juniper you're tasting. So when you come visit my distillery, you can sit down and I'll run you through a few varietals, and you say, oh, that's my varietal. So I write that down. Then I said, let's talk about the back notes. Okay, and again, I've got an open palette. are you a citrus person? Are you an herbal person? So then I'll play some things like coriander or grapefruit on you. You say, oh, I'm a citrus person. And I'll build your personal gin, write that down, have it in my computer. Since I'm a robot engineer, I also can make a device which will dispense all that very quickly. So you come in, and what I do is have facial recognition that says, oh, you're back again. Can I make you a bottle of your gin? Hit a button, the bottle is made, put a cork in it, and you're off with your bottle of gin. So anyway, that's how you turn distilling into a whole nother experience. So I've got probably, what, 15 to 20 minutes to play with you all. Is that my timing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was going to unmute just to be like, wow, that's impressive, by the way. Thanks for sharing how that works. But yeah, you have about 20 minutes.
Well, that's my main message is, life is a sandbox, and you get in there and you can do anything you want, and you can dig a hole or make a mountain. And so what I've done at being a professor, because I was going to Juilliard to be a flautist, which is the proper term for somebody that plays the flute. And I said, so what's wrong with this picture? There's only so much music you can play in a lifetime. Let me go be a scientist, which gives me a much broader sandbox to play in. So I ended up with a PhD in biochemistry, which is, when you look at the New York City roadmap, that's just a little flick on the complexity of human biology. And so there was a place I could play with human biology, and let's see if we can fix some human problems. So armed with a PhD and taught by a spectacular mentor, this Filipino pediatrician, really opened my eyes in terms of how you get into human biology and make a difference. And he was an MD, PhD. His wife was a pediatrician. They were just solving diseases all day long. So I just said, when we're interacting in the laboratory, tell me the worst medical problems you've faced, and let's see if we can do something about it. So we opened, so that opened my mind to where you can play with a science and do something good for humanity that has lasting value. So ultimately, I did a National Institute of Health postdoctoral experience. Again, somebody who was studied with a Nobel Prize winner. So I tried to get access to people who thought differently. And so I think I put tools into my tool chest that gave me something to work with. Came down to UVA, and for another postdoc, because I said I need an exposure to different fields, they said, sorry, we don't have anything related to what you're interested in. So I said, okay, that's a bummer, because there's nothing better than Charlottesville, place to live. So I got back to DC, and the phone rang, and I picked up the phone, and they said, we did a deeper dive on your resume. Would you like to come back and give a lecture and see if you want to join the faculty? And I said, well, yeah. So I came back, gave a lecture, but I invited somebody, did my homework. So politics is always very important, and found that this one doctor was bound to be the next dean of the medical center. So I made sure I invited him to join my lecture. And I think he said, who is this guy? In my notes, I said, I think you're going to be the next dean. And that's the hook I had for him. So he went in, and lo and behold, before I gave my lecture, he became dean. He came to my lecture. After I gave my lecture, he signaled to my chairman, let's go out in the hall. And during the question and answer period, they came back in, everybody, everything ended, everybody left, and those two people left in the room were the chairman of pathology and the now dean. Said, would you like to join the faculty? So you gotta stack your deck in order to get a pathway in this life. So, but sometimes it doesn't take much. And so I've been here ever since, 36 years. And so now I said, okay, let me be I was appointed one of the directors of laboratory medicine, because as a graduate student, I was working most of my nights until 4 o'clock in the morning running the neonatal intensive care clinical laboratory, just because it was kind of a cool thing to do, all those little babies and all that science. And so they said, you've got the right background, why don't you be one of the directors of laboratory medicine? So that was my clinical duties. And then I started a research lab, and my boss at the time said, here's your 5 feet of bench space. 2 years later, I had 3 laboratories running because I wasn't going to be satisfied with 5 feet. And then, so then I started a new thing, which is called the Association for Laboratory Automation. It drove me crazy that you had a rack of test tubes and that's all you could get done in a day. And I said, we can do better than that. And so robotics was certainly building cars and doing all this stuff in industry. I said, why don't we put those robots to work in laboratories? And let's start a society of the Association for Laboratory Automation. Well, long story short, that's my first nonprofit. And now it's got 7,000 people show up every year. It's got a European branch and a Chinese branch. And so it's worldwide. I started the first journal called Journal of Audit of the Association of Laboratory Automation, called JALA. Sounded kind of cool. And so that's the #1 journal in the field. It's now morphed into 2 journals. The association had joined with another one. Now it's the Society for Laboratory Automation and Screening. So it's, I'd like to start things, but once they start, and you have to decide if you're a doer or a thinker. Hopefully you're both, but if you're one of the other, if you're a doer, find a good idea and latch onto it and go with it. If you're a thinker, get on with your next thing, because there are fewer thinkers than doers. That's just nature. And so I'm a thinker, so I started that. It started going, I backed off. I started medical automation. That's my next nonprofit, and that's still going. You can go to medicalautomation.org and sign up for free and get a newsletter every Tuesday morning about 3 a.m. Out will come a newsletter with 20 good ideas or 10 good ideas you should be looking at in medicine. And so my partner in crime is Terry Scherer, the former health and science curator for the Smithsonian Institute. So he was collecting the best of American technology for 40 years, but he was driving an hour and a half each way to work. He says, I'm really tired of this. I said, well, let me get you appointed as the innovation director for the Innova Health System. So now he did that for a number of years. He was 10 minutes from home and he was able to do the same stuff for a health system. So he is the curator of the newsletter you'll see every Tuesday morning. So it's really good content. I suggest you do that. So that's my nonprofit world. Then I said, let's do some for-profit stuff where we can actually make things happen. And I started a series of biotechs. The first thing, my grandmother fell in her elder care facility, which is the Marriott place up on near Old Georgetown Road. And she was on the floor for 4 hours before somebody found her. And I said, well, what's wrong with this picture? We need to solve this problem of elders who are not being monitored, watched, cared for in a granular way, which we should be doing. So I started an elder care company, which has morphed into about 6 versions, and now it's got 6,000 installations across the country. But basically it was a series of sensors, very inexpensive. For instance, your mattress pad in your bed was monitoring breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, how much agitation you were having while you were sleeping. And especially for memory impaired elders who were having pain that they couldn't articulate, this mattress pad would measure all of that. And so it would alert the caregiver to ramp up the pain medication just a little bit, and they'd ramp it up to a point where the thrashing didn't happen at night, and that's their new sweet spot for being pain-free without being able to articulate it. We had vibration sensors in the floor so we could see how people walked. Because there's a happy walk, there's a sad walk. There's also, if it's just 2 footsteps all the time, or you have visitors, We've got 4 footsteps or 6 footsteps. We can look at socialization. We can look at mood. We could look at whether you're asymmetric. If you had a hip joint replacement, we could see if you're healing properly because you're asymmetric and you're getting more symmetric. So that was another sensor. In the kitchen, we instrumented all the cabinets and the refrigerator and the stove. We could get your complete nutrition profile. So we knew how you were eating. In the bathroom, we measured humidity. Was it a little bit of water? You washed your hands. Was it a little bit more humidity? You flushed the toilet, or a lot of humidity? You bathed. So if you weren't bathing or you weren't doing this, that, and the other, we sent somebody in. So we matched. We knew your life, and we knew what wasn't going right, and we sent the system automatically dispatched the appropriate caregiver. If you're not eating well, don't send somebody that can bathe you. Send somebody that can feed you. And also we can deal with the kitchen and do things. So we did a case-controlled study in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Long story why we were way the hell out there, but we essentially did a monitored group and unmonitored group. And after several months, we found that the care was improved by 300% and the cost was reduced by 75%. So that's why, that's the time I started medical automation, because I said, what's missing in medicine? Why is it a $2 trillion expense in America? And why do many people don't have access? It's just too expensive. Reduce the cost by 75%, increase the quality by 300%. How tough is that? So that's why this thing has grown into a new way of doing elder care. Craig Venter was having real challenges at the National Institute of Health. Actually threw him out because he said, I'm going to take the $20 billion Human Genome Project, and I'm going to do it in 1/3 the time for 1/10 the cost, and I'm going to sequence the human genome. And they didn't believe him, so they threw him out. It's a long story. You should look up the history. So when I heard that, I said, his problem is he has a lot of DNA to analyze, and he can't get to it fast enough. So we invented a freezer at -80 degrees. It had a robot in there, and we ganged 15 of them together so he could have access to all his DNA just by getting on the computer and pushing a key, and all of it would go to a robot to do the analysis. So the first award Craig Venter ever got was, I put him on the podium and gave him the Beckman Award at the Association for Laboratory Automation, and he bought my first 15 freezers, which has now been bought and sold several times, and it's a Boston company up there for automated biorepositories. So you just have to find a problem and think of the solution has to have the really simple thing. It has to get it done faster and cheaper, and it has to have higher quality. That's, you know, that's the name of any game you could possibly imagine on planet Earth. I'm trying to think of what else. So many companies have come and gone through my head. We started a pharmaceutical company because what is the #1 chronic disease in the world? It's high blood pressure and associated cardiovascular issues. So that's been the theme, my basic research theme, because I said, if it's the biggest disease in the world, it should be the one that can be funded at a really great extent. So I've probably brought in about $70 million in NIH research into the University of Virginia since I've been here, which is fairly large ticket item. And I have now 5 PhDs, which really cover the waterfront in terms of solving complex problems. So we now have a machine of people, and we have probably about 8 robotic systems, and we just bought a mass spectrometer. All this stuff is, we can measure anything, anyhow, anywhere. And so we're solving not only hypertension, which is about 30% of Americans, and who knows what in the rest of the world, but salt sensitivity, which is a change in blood pressure due to how much salt you eat. And the federal government says you should have about 2 grams of sodium in a day and you'll live forever. Well, that's not the truth. The truth is, and you're hearing it here first, is that 18% of Americans need to reduce their salt content. 15% of Americans need to increase their salt content, and the people in the middle should stay around 2 grams. So you can now say that only half of Americans should eat what the feds recommend, and the other half should be really, really careful about what they do, that they need more or less. And if you don't get it right, you have a 60% chance of dying before the age of 70, 60% greater chance of dying before the age of 70 of stroke, heart attack, kidney failure. So that's pretty dire consequences. If you have a family history of stroke, if you're African American, if you have increased body weight, you really need to get your salt right, because then you're just reducing your life to 60 to 70 as opposed to 100. There's no reason why we all can't live to 100. Let's leave cancer aside. That's a very complex problem. It's so complex and so specific to the individual. I don't want to play it. Find it simple for a lot of people. So this is we novel tests where we just get a urine sample from you, and we pull out the living cells that your kidney is exfoliating, is the scientific term, or just you're shedding cells into your urine. We take those living cells, we study them, and we, in a very simple test, we challenge them with salt. So we pretend you either went to McDonald's or you went to a vegan restaurant. That's the extremes. And the cells respond exactly the way your body responds. And we give you what's called a personal salt index, PSI, pound pressure per square inch. So, but what happens is, if you eat too much salt and your body can't get rid of it fast enough, then at night your blood pressure doesn't drop by 10% and repair all your capillaries, which have been beaten up all day, and then it comes back so you can get up in the morning and go beat up your capillaries again. But if you don't give your capillaries a rest, they start unwinding, and they unwind in your brain. You have memory impairment. You can't remember somebody's name. That's probably little strokes. And they unwind in your heart, and they unwind in your kidneys and your eyes for blindness. So capillary health is very important, and all you have to do is get in your salt zone. And if you're way out of your salt zone, actually we developed a novel test to look with a really cheap microscope. We look at your thinnest body part, which is the cuticle of your finger. That's very, very thin but alive. And guess what? We can just look at the tip of your finger and we can see the capillaries all lined up like fence posts. And if they're nice and straight, and it comes up as a capillary, does a U-turn, and comes back as a venule, and it's all wrapped together. If that is beginning to unwrap and it's getting fatter and you get bulges in it, that's what's happening all over your body. So we can now look at your finger and say, oh, you're not in your salt zone. Guess what? 12 weeks of getting in your salt zone, all that goes back to normal again. And it goes back to normal, and it goes back to normal everywhere else. So that's my next thing, is we're developing a clinical laboratory within my research laboratory to do the urine test on you. You can come in and get your finger checked, and then you get your PSI, personal salt index. You get in your zone, and you can start adding, maybe 10 or 20 more birthdays to your calendar. So that's my research world. And so that comes full circle with the looking at your capillaries and tasting your brandy or your favorite gin, personal salt index and personal gin, is that also will get your capillaries all wrapped back together again. So it's all about good health and having something you do all day that is the best sandbox you could possibly play in. So there's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That is incredible, Robin. I'm sure everyone on here, if you were listening, just learned a ton. And thank you for the resources that you gave as well.
Well, I'm a professor, so I tend to profess. Sorry about that.
Salt intake is fascinating. I would love to see. You can use the hand raising feature if nobody's talking. You can speak up. So does anyone? We can start with Mary because she raised her hand first. Is anybody? Mary, I'll let you have the floor for any questions for Robin.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. When do you expect the PSI test to be available commercially?
That's always, that's my big lament in life is I've been telling the world that point of care testing, having these tests available in your bathroom is going to happen in the next 5 years. Well, I said that 30 years ago, and we're not there yet. So, you may not, my predictions are often ambitious, but we are running the test in our lab routinely. And if it hadn't been for COVID, we have SALT studies. This is the funding I get. And any of you are welcome. We need as many participants as we can. As soon as we open up again, you come in, everything's free. If you get through the whole cycle, you get $200 in your pocket. So there's a little financial incentive. But we have salts for free, and we say, oh, you don't have any genetic predisposition to be salt sensitive, and there's the 18% are inverse salt sensitive. They have to eat more salt to lower their blood pressure. That's my big thing. I just put off a $13 million grant on that story. But we check your genes, and if you don't have the propensity on the current study, we can't admit you into the SALT studies. But if you have the genes, we welcome you into the SALT study, and what we do is we give you 2 weeks. We give you 100% of what you're going to eat for 2 weeks. Just come in, pick it up every 3 days, and get your food. And we're giving you a very high salt load for a week and a very low salt load for a week. And we're checking your blood pressure very carefully. And if you're getting a change in blood pressure that we can measure with those differences in salt, then we tell you where you are on the salt curve. But we're also doing these other biological tests to confirm that our tests work and can diagnose you correctly. And then so you actually get a twofer. You get your salt study, which is very expensive, about $6,000, and you get your biological urine test. And so you know where your zone is. I mean, you're going to be really well studied. And then you just go off and, get your salt in your zone. In China, the average salt consumption is 10 grams a day, and 50% of all Chinese die of strokes. In southern China, it's 25 grams a day. So they don't have access to as much fresh food as we do, so everything's pickled. So there's a really good, my next goal is to see if I can get China interested in this challenge and deploy a test, which is relatively simple to do. So that's a long answer to a very short question, maybe 6 months, but you can come to the SALT study and we'll pay you to give you your PSI.
Robin, if someone is interested in that, how would they go about getting?
Just go to saltstudy.com. And so there's a place to sign up there. And so our clinical coordinator is going back to work tomorrow, I think it is. And so we're ramping up very slowly, but we should be able to take our participants within the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Awesome. All right, and Jen, to medical, that was fascinating, by the way, the things you've done with the elderly and monitoring and whatnot, to SALT. So lots of different topics. So any other questions for Robin?
I can answer questions in about any field. They may not be right, but I can give you an answer.
No doubt. Go ahead. Linda wanted to know the name of your company, your distillery, your Jen company.
Oh, if you go to, okay, so here's a short story. Thomas Jefferson, we face east and bow every morning to pay homage to Thomas Jefferson when you're in Charlottesville. So, and so I bought a small mountain south of Charlottesville, and it's worth a visit. We're up at 1,000 feet with sweeping views of the Blue Ridge. And so we call it, so Monticello means small mountain, kind of small, pretty mountain in Italian. And so our mountain is called Monte Piccolo, which is tiny mountain. So we don't want to challenge Thomas Jefferson. We want to pay homage. So montepiccolo.com, M-O-N-T-E for mountain and P-I-C-C-O-L-O, run them together, Monte Piccolo, kind of like Monticello is all one word. So we played that one. So montepiccolo.com, and you'll see views, and you'll see my varietal junipers, and you can come take it. And at the very last tab on the right, you can hit a button, and we had a 360 tour of the distillery, so that you can, while I'm lecturing on distillation, herbal issues, and how to properly taste a brandy, very important, that you can zoom around on your phone by just with your finger and see the whole distillery, and you even can see the ceiling. It's a 14 camera experience. So we don't fool around at Monte Piccolo.
No, it's amazing. And is it open, you know, is it clear on your website kind of when it's open and when people can come?
Well, it's by appointment only, is what I'd like to do, is tell me a story, and I'll decide whether I want to talk to you or not. But you all are welcome. Just say you were on this panel. So what I'm trying to do is just get a group of people together, so I don't have to do this. I don't want to stay open all day, because I'm in there experimenting all day, making concoctions and doing all this stuff. And we're building.
Being a chemist.
Yeah. In fact, Brooks Pate in the chemistry department, he was the innovator of the year about 3 years ago, and UVA. And so when I listened to his lecture, a light bulb went off on 1800 watts. He has a new kind of spectrometer that is going to probably get him a Nobel Prize. Mass spectrometer is the most fanciest gizmo you can put in your lab, which will analyze any molecule, but you have to teach it all the molecules, and then it says, oh, what you just gave me matches this one, but you can't give it an unknown. The mass spectrometer doesn't know an unknown. His spectrometer, you give it an unknown, and it deduces exactly what the molecular structure is. Now, how does it do that? Well, it's fast Fourier molecular rotational vibrational spectroscopy. You get molecules sitting in a gas phase just by heating them up. And then you put a microwave ping in there, and all the molecules absorb that ping and start rotating and vibrating. And then when they start slowing down, all of the different bonds give off a different signal. And a very fancy computer deduces all of that. And you can get the exact structure of things that nobody's ever seen before. So I applied, being a new distiller, I applied to the American Distilling Institute. They've set up a whole society. They've got 2,000 or 3,000 members, and they put out a call for a grant. I said, okay, I can do that. So I wrote a grant to put that spectrometer to use in distillation. And guess what? It worked. And we found smells in peaches that if you just have peach candy, it's like a peach, but it's not like biting into a nice white peach on an August afternoon. We found compounds in peach essence from out of my still that nobody had ever seen before. So we can essentially build flavors because we know what they are now. So I applied for the grant. So now I've been appointed to the advisory board of the American Distilling Institute. I'm the editor-in-chief of Scientific Spirits, their new journal, and I've received their grant twice, so now on their granting board. So there seems to be sort of a paucity of imagination out there. But anyway, so when you come visit my distillery, we can talk about science, or we can talk about just flavors or whatever experience. And I want to put people together who have similar interests, because we don't want to talk deep science if you're not interested in science, you just want to drink. We'll just bring the drinkers in.
Robin, we have time for one more question, and Linda with SBDC asked a great question. So can you talk about at least one failure you've had? And first of all, I'm going to preface this with, it doesn't seem like you had any. I mean, this is pretty amazing. I feel like you've done more than in one lifetime than, 10 people, but a failure that you've had and how that's impacted you or changed your course or just had influence on you.
Well, so if you're starting a new business, you need to talk to me, because I would consider all my businesses a failure from a standpoint as a business. I'm a thinker. I like to create and then let go of the wheel, but I've never made any serious money out of any of my businesses, because the business people are the ones to make money out of a business, and the first person they throw out is me. You get an idea man to start your business, but then there are liabilities, so you get rid of them. And so that's my failure, is not hanging on to the idea long enough to capitalize on it to give me. I don't have unlimited capital. Fortunately, I have lots of capital, but not unlimited. It would be really nice to be Steve Bezos and say, "Oh, I think I'll spend $100 million on that," or be an Elon Musk and solve really big three-dimensional problems. So my problems are more intellectual problems. Instead of building something, I solve complexity and point people in the right direction. So find out. So the answer to that question is, there are no failures. Those are all learning moments. But figure out who you are as quickly as you can. And then when you figure out who you are, then you're in the zone where you can do the most for yourself, importantly, but the most good. That combination is really cool, is do something for yourself that does the most good. And so I found that very early on, but I kept getting upset when people would throw me out. And I should have said, that's a good thing, instead of that's a bad thing. So a little philosophy there.
Yeah, that's a great tip, something to close on, and kind of knowing yourself so you can surround yourself also by the people that fill in what you don't as well.
Yeah.
So do you care, Robin, if we share your email on here so people can get in touch with you if they have any questions?
Yeah, just know that I can't answer within 5 minutes. I try to get it within 10 minutes, but I get about 600 emails a day, but they're all good.
Or let me ask, what is the best way for someone to connect with you? Is that the best way?
Yeah, it's the best way. Just Robin, it says robin@virginia.edu. That shows you how old I am.
Oh, man.
I managed to get my.
You're like David Tuvey has a similar, he's David at virginia.edu. So it's Robin at Virginia.
Oh, there's a gray hair, yeah.
All right, so Robin's email is on here. I don't think that's the email I was emailing you at, by the way. But anyway.
I've got lots of them.
Yeah, that one's easier. So Robin's email's on here. We also put Leslie's information up here for those of you guys that want to get in touch with him. We're going to, again, thank you, Robin. That was incredible. We're going to shift into announcements. And then afterwards, if you still want to talk to Robin and Leslie, I will explain how to get into the chat rooms. And then you can continue dialoguing until 10 is when we have that going until. So welcome to just go network for the rest of the time. And again, these chat rooms are open until 10. And you guys are awesome. And then Leslie and Robin, if you have any trouble making it over those rooms, just let me know and we can talk openly right now and I can explain if you don't see those tabs.